In my family, there was a death that occurred, and it pained me a lot. This was my elder brother who passed away when I was in Form 2, I presume. And I came back home to see a lifeless body lying in our compound and people weeping, and it was a sorry thing. I mean, seeing your brother that you used to play with and have fun with and crack jokes with lying lifeless, you do not want that. I mean, it's not funny. My point is that death is not something that you can joke with. Death is final, and there is finality with it. And if we come to it, there is a lot we can be able to learn from our death or from the people who are departing. And in this episode, I want to take a look at some of the guys that said some things that mattered, or some things that were on their minds as they were dying. And there could be very many other, but I'm just going to use those to drive a point home. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
It is staggering, the statistics about the deaths that we watch, either on the news or on video or on movies or on series on a daily basis. It is staggering the amount of death that we watch, to such an extent that our hearts might have been desensitized to that. Case in point, when I was growing up, whenever a death would occur in the village, the whole village will be in sorrow. They will know, they will be gathering there, and I mean, everyone will be touched by that eventuality. But then I've observed that as I've continued to live, very many other deaths have been occurring over and over again, to such an extent that even a neighbor can die. And by the way, even a close relative can pass away, but you're not necessarily so much affected. I know I'm taking a totally different tangent, but I'm saying that we have experienced, or we experience, or we see death, or we're surrounded with death, maybe on a daily basis, or maybe every hour, to such an extent that we are becoming so desensitized to the finality and the gravity of death itself. But there is so much that we can be able to learn from it if we wanted to live a life that is productive, that has direction, that has urgency, that is contributing and has impact and has a legacy. And for posterity's sake, you will need to take death into consideration, because you and I know that we are not on this earth for 200 years. We are not on this earth maybe even for 100 years. I look at a life of these massive visionaries in the name of Billy Graham. Billy Graham died before he was 100. But this man traversed every continent of this world, talked to very many presidents and so on, and so millions of people's lives impacted by his life, the way he lived. The other guy that I read the other day, in fact, it's just 1 year since he died, Reinhard Bonnke saw over 72 million people have a life transformation to become Christians. And I'm talking about those ones who are born again, who are basically transforming their lives from the inside outside and following a break, taking a total break from the life that they used to live because of the impact of the life of Reinhard Bonnke. And he died. When he died, and I read his impact and read about his statistics, I was blown away. We learn so much from the guys who are dying, and I'm going to tell you stories of several guys, maybe not so many, but one of the guys that I look at, and his death was one of the most interesting deaths, and I normally quote this guy very many times, not quote him, but quote his story very many times. This guy is a patriarch. He's called Jacob. Jacob had a family of 12 and so on and so forth, and if you read the Bible, you see this guy, he calls his family, all of his kids, and then starts speaking into their lives. Wow. He starts saying, Jacob, he starts saying, Judah, you're like this. Issachar, you're like this. Levi, you're like this. Joseph, you're like this. And he speaks words into their lives. And then it is recorded, once he finished speaking, he gathered his legs on his bed and died. Mission accomplished. As in, he wasn't helpless. Basically, it's like he switched on or switched off a button on his life after speaking into his children. This man had control over death, so to speak. I don't know, it's technical, but think about it. It's recorded after he had spoken himself. No one helped him. He himself put his feet on his bed and then expired. There's another guy in the Bible. He did not die. Actually, two guys. One is called Enoch. We are told that this guy walked with God and he was normal. I mean, that's all is written about this guy. And then Elijah, we are told that he was taken away and he was seen being taken away, and the prophets knew that he was going to be taken away, but his protege Elisha followed him and observed what happened, and chariots of fire came and swept this guy away, and I mean, he was no more. The last words he spoke to Elisha were recorded, and he said that if you see me being taken, you'll have a double portion of my anointing. And it happened. And yet the most interesting guy about his death in the Bible is a guy called Moses. Moses is a funny guy. Okay, not really funny, but if you read Moses' story, I do not want to be sidetracked, but if you read Moses' story, it's divided into 40. The first 40 years of his life, he was raised as a king or as a prince of Egypt. Customs, cultures of the ways of Egypt, the Egyptians, he knew them, and he was being propped up to be a ruler. And he sees these guys persecuting his people, and he kills one, and then he flees. The second 40 years of his life is in oblivion, basically in obscurity. 40 years. And the next 40 years he spends trying to deliver the Israelites and making them to cross over to the promised land. But when it's recorded about Moses' death, it is so funny. This guy, he put a mantle on Joshua, his follower, and said, you're going to take over. And then Moses literally walked to his death. And they're telling us nobody knows where his body was, but Moses walked to his death. He walked to his death, as in he walked to die. I'm going to die, and no big deal about it. I'm going to transition to the next life. No big deal about it. What do we learn from these guys? We learn that the way they lived impacted the way they died. And then Apostle Paul, when you come into the New Testament, this is a guy that Basically, if you told me to have a type or a visionary or a mentor, someone that I admire the most in the Bible, it is this man called Paul, because he espouses those three things I normally teach about on these episodes and in this podcast. Paul espouses purpose. Paul espouses productivity. I'm talking productivity. This guy worked like nobody else could work in his day and in his age. I mean, writing and traveling. 2/3 of the New Testament is Paul. And he covered the known world at that moment in time, traversing the globe, causing upheavals all over the place that he went. The guys, the way they lived impacted the way they died. And he said, I have run my race. You know, Paul was beheaded. But he said, even before he was beheaded, he said, I have run my race. I have finished my fight. As in, what I was told to do, I have done. It's done and dusted. Mission accomplished. Finito. And now it's okay for me to go. Wow. Think about that. Think about that. And then, contemporaries in our day and in this age, there's a guy who was a faith teacher called Kenneth E. Hagin. And Kenneth E. Hagin, let me just tell you one story about Kenneth E. Hagin. I read in his book. He talks of a story of a guy who basically fractured his leg. He was going down the steps and then fractured his leg to such an extent that the ankle bone was protruding. You could see the bone. And they were in the faith healing ministry and so on. And so they asked this guy whether he should believe for supernatural healing or they should rush him to hospital. He says that let us believe for healing, and they pray for him and so on. And then they tell him, put your faith into action, start walking. And the guy starts walking and there is excruciating pain and he falls down and blacks out. And they tell him, we've got to take you to hospital. He says, no, I'm going to believe for supernatural healing. And what happens is that they try it maybe 3 times and it doesn't. And then someone discovers, oh, we are doing it the wrong way. If you're really believing and you have faith, then when you step, you should step with the fractured leg, the injured leg, the one that the bone is protruding. So they pray for the guy and then he steps with his leg and instantly he gets healed. I know some people don't believe that story, but it did happen. Anyway, that is how Kenneth Hagin used to operate. And Kenneth Hagin is recorded just before he died. Listen, just before he died, he was telling guys that I'm finished, I'm through. Whatever it is that I was sent to do, I have done. I am through. And now I'm just waiting for my day to transition. And few months down the line, Kenneth Hagin was no more. How about that for your death? So we're going to learn about one more person in the podcast tomorrow, and then we're going to learn maybe 6 things that we can be able to learn from these guys and their death. Until tomorrow, stay tuned and bye-bye. A special shout out to my mentor Jeffrey Howard of Visionary Business University, found at mastermindmentor.com, who has graciously provided me with the soundtrack and the introductory track to this podcast. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.